Welcome to this webinar on the 21st meeting of the Chemical Review Committee and the POPs Review Committee. My name is Andrea Lechner. I'm a program officer in the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. I have the pleasure of talking about the 21st meeting of the Chemical Review Committee today, and then my colleague Kay Ono will talk about the POPs Review Committee. At the end of our presentation, there will be some time for questions, comments, discussion. We have our cameras all, not open due to security reasons, but then later on, if you wish to ask questions, you can raise your hand and we will unmute your microphone, or you can also send your questions in the chat. So let's start with the Chemical Review Committee. So the CRC, as we say in short, is the subsidiary body under the Rotterdam Convention, and it is entrusted with the process of listing new chemicals in Annex 3 to the Convention. There are two main tracks under the Rotterdam Convention. The first one is for all parties that have adopted the final regulatory action to ban or severely restrict a chemical. They should notify the Secretariat in writing of any such action. And when we have received notifications from at least two different regions, the prior informed consent regions, then they are brought forward to the Chemical Review Committee for review. They have to meet a certain number of criteria, first at the stage of the review by the Secretariat, and then the Chemical Review Committee reviews them against the criteria in Annex 2. So this is really for final regulatory action, and all parties should submit notifications. The second track is a track where proposals have to be made. So this is actually for developing countries or countries with economy in transition that experience problems caused by severely hazardous pesticide formulations under conditions of use in its territory. They may propose the listing of such severely hazardous pesticides formulations, and then the committee would review them against the criteria in Part 3 of Annex 4 of the Convention. In both cases, if the committee then finds that the criteria are met, it would recommend to the Conference of the Party the listing of these chemicals in Annex 3 to the Convention. And then as a second step, the committee develops the draft decision guidance document. And these documents are intended for supporting parties in taking their import response decisions once the chemical and if the chemical is listed. So in the case of the Rotterdam Convention, inclusion in Annex 3 means that all parties will be asked whether they wish to continue importing this chemical and then to respect the import decisions of other countries. The CRC is composed of 31 government-designated experts from the 5 UN regions, but it is open to the participation of observers. And in the case of the committee, observers are the parties to the convention, so any party representative can attend CRC meetings as an observer, and also the classic observers to the convention can participate in the meetings. So the upcoming CRC meeting will be held from 23rd to 26th September at the headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Rome. And pre-meetings of the intersessional task groups will be held on the Monday, 22nd. And I'll talk in a minute about those meetings. The meetings are, well, the meeting plus the pre-meetings are entirely face-to-face meetings. They are chaired by Ms. Noluzuku Gwawai from South Africa. And then the CRC is held in English only. There's no interpretation and all meeting documents are in English. The original registration deadline was 22nd of August, so that was last Friday, but it is still possible to register until the end of this week. Please, if you still wish to register, kindly do so by 31st August. And then here on this website, you can find all the practical logistical information about the meeting. You'll find the link for registration, and you'll also find the meeting documents. All of the meeting documents are already there. There are just some final information documents missing. So to get an idea about the upcoming CRC meeting, these would be the most important documents. First of all, the provisional agenda, document number 1, and then the annotated agenda, document 1@1, which provides an overview of all the documents linked to each agenda item. The scenario note, information document 1, gives an overview of how the chair intends on running the meeting. And then the tentative schedule, Inf 2, contains the same information, but in a tabular format, an overview of the entire week. So here you can see the provisional agenda for the 21st meeting. You can see it's actually a really full agenda for a 4-day meeting. There are no draft decision guidance documents on the agenda, so none of the chemicals are already at the second review step this time. They're all still at the first review step. So you can see that there are 19 chemicals for which the committee will review notifications of final regulatory action. Some of these are new, and some of these are carryover from previous meetings on which the committee hasn't yet concluded. There will also be 3 severely hazardous pesticide formulation proposals for consideration by the committee, which are also coming back from a previous meeting, and then a couple of other matters I will talk about at the end. So this is about the intersessional task group work. The work of the CRC doesn't start right at the meeting. It actually starts a little bit before through the intersessional task groups. For new notifications that are to be reviewed by the committee, there are task groups set up. So these are composed only of CRC members, where for the CRC members look into these notifications. They have a first review on whether they meet the criteria in Annex 2 to the convention. This is also being done actually for new SHPF proposals. So first review is being done. They get a chance to see what additional information is needed. Maybe there's a need for clarification from the submitter. And then task group drafter and chair send this to the rest of the task group, who get a chance to comment. And then a revised version is posted on the web. And at that point, all other members, but also all observers, are invited to submit comments on the draft reports. And then these comments are addressed at the pre-meetings on the 22nd of September. So on that day, the task group reports are finalized, and then they are submitted to the CRC as a conference room paper, and they provide a basis for the discussion by the CRC. You can find here the link of the task group webpage. All the draft task group reports are already uploaded, and you can have a look at them. Then there's also a link towards the Handbook of Working Procedure and Policy Guidance for the CRC. That's quite an important document. It's a collection of procedures that were put in place either by the CRC or in some cases also approved by the COP. And in some cases, just a compilation or a collection of examples and past how the committee dealt with past issues, and the intention is to ensure consistency and continuity in the work of the committee. Just to say that this intersessional task group work is meant to enhance the efficiency of the committee and allow for participation of members and observers, but it's not replacing the full discussion. Each chemical will be fully discussed during the official CRC 21 meeting. And then also related to this task group work, the CRC Bureau has decided for a second time to follow an approach of prioritization of this intersessional task group work, because for 2 meetings already, the agenda of the CRC has been very full, and doing this intersessional task group work is quite a bit of work. The reports have to be drawn up, etc., and reviewed. But there are quite a number of notifications, usually in front of the committee, for which it is quite clear that they are very likely not meeting the criteria of Annex 2, because of the fact that notifications need to be done by all parties. They clearly don't always meet all the criteria because they're not meant as proposals for listing a chemical. They are notifications that parties have to do. And for that reason, many of them will not meet the criteria foreseen in the Convention for listing chemicals. And that's why the Bureau usually proposes to prioritize the intersessional work and to focus on those notifications that merit this work. And the criteria that the committee is using is something that is filled out by the parties themselves in the notification form, because there's a question in section 2.4 asking, was the final regulatory action based on a risk or hazard evaluation? So this is actually one of the main criteria in reviewing the notifications at the CRC level, is whether a risk evaluation was carried out by the submitting party involving prevailing conditions within the party. So that's why the answer to this response is already quite an important indicator. And when it is ticked off as yes, then the notifications go through the intersessional work. And when it is ticked off as no, they usually don't go unless the Bureau sees something in the notification that could still hint towards a risk evaluation having been carried out, and they feel it might still be worth to look at it in detail in the intersessional work, just to be sure sufficient information is available to the committee in taking its final decision. So on a notification by notification basis, this is suggested by the Bureau on whether intersessional work is carried out. And then here also, this is really just a preparatory step. It is up to CRC then to fully decide on each notification on whether criteria are met, which ones are met, which are not met. And for all those where there is no task group report available, there's a short summary of the result of the Bureau's preliminary review available, and that is laid out in this meeting document number 2. So let's have a look at these 19 chemicals and 3 SHPF that will be considered by the upcoming meeting. So the first is methylparathion. And just to say, actually, all of the chemicals that are on the agenda this time are pesticides. So there are no industrial chemical. We have methylparathion, an insecticide and acaricide used in agriculture. Here there is a notification from the EU that was already found to meet the criteria at the first CRC meeting. And now there's a new notification available from Brazil, where the use of methylparathion was prohibited due to human health concerns. And so a task group report is available. If the notification from Brazil was found to meet criteria, this would lead to a listing recommendation because there is already the EU notification available, so a notification from another PIC region. Also important to note that actually methylparathion is already listed in Annex 3 to the Rotterdam Convention as a severely hazardous pesticide formulation, so at a very specific percentage of active ingredient. So that is already in the convention. If methylparathion was listed as a pesticide, that is considered a more comprehensive scope of the listing entry, and then it would replace the SHPF listing. So this has already happened also in the past with another chemical, that the previous SHPF listing was replaced with a pesticide listing, which is broader in scope. Then the second pesticide is dichlorobus, which is an organophosphate insecticide and acaricide used by the notifying party on flowers, crops, and ornamental trees. So the review of this chemical already started at CRC 20, where a couple of notifications were reviewed, but the committee did not finalize its review of a notification from the EU. It was seeking some additional information from the EU, and then actually following CRC 20, the EU submitted a new notification for dichlorobus, replacing its previously submitted notification. So that one is for review by CRC 21, and the task group report is available. However, there would not be any matching notification from another PIC region. So even if it was found to meet the criteria, it would not lead towards a listing recommendation by the committee. Then we have chlorothalonil, used as a pesticide on fruits, vegetables, coffees, and flowers. It was prohibited in the EU due to human health and environmental concerns. So we have this notification from the EU, and then a matching a second notification from another PIC region, from Costa Rica. And Costa Rica is actually one of these exceptions where they had ticked off no on the notification form, but the Bureau still saw quite a bit of information provided in the supporting documentation. So they decided to send it to the intersessional task group work to make sure a detailed analysis is carried out of the two notifications. Then we have FENAMIFOS. Here we have notifications from the EU and Mozambique. In both cases, the prohibition is linked to human health concerns, and task group reports are available for both notifications. The next one is methiocarb, an insecticide used on maize, potato, groundnut, and citrus, and also used as a bird repellent. Again, we have notifications from the EU and Mozambique with task group reports available for both of them. Moving on to diazinon, a synthetic organophosphate pesticide, insecticide, acaricide, and nematicide. It was used by the notifiers for fruits, vegetables, crops, nuts, and in the case of Mozambique, also for veterinary purposes. So you can see here that there are additional notifications available. There's also Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and Turkey. But for these, there's no task group report available. Task group reports are available for the ones from the EU and Mozambique. Then moving on to metomil, an agricultural insecticide. And here we have notifications from 3 parties, Mozambique, Chile, and Uruguay, with task group reports available for the 3 of them, noting though that Chile had actually ticked off no on the question of whether they had carried out a risk or hazard evaluation, but the Bureau decided to look in detail also into the Chile notification. Then there is also fipronil, an insecticide, acaricide, and also used for the control of arthropods. You have notifications here from a list, a group of African countries, Cabo Verde, Chad, Gambia, Mauritania, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. These are all members of the Sahelian Pesticide Committee, and the members of this committee take decisions on the registration of pesticides together. So all of the notifications relate to the same final regulatory action. And there is a task group report available for these notifications. And then there are also notifications from the EU and Turkey, but for those there is no task group report available. And then moving on to dicofol, which was actually already on the agenda of CRC 20, but the CRC did not yet look into it. So it's for CRC 21 to carry out the review. There are previous notifications that were found to meet the criteria from the EU and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And now the additional notifications for the committee to review are from Chile, Peru, Switzerland, and Turkey. Only the notification from Switzerland was put into the intersessional work and has a task group report available. In this case, if the notification from Switzerland was found to meet the criteria, that would not trigger a listing recommendation because all of the notifications would be in the same PIC region, in the European region. So there's a need for a notification meeting the criteria from another PIC region to trigger a listing recommendation. And dicofol is listed in Annex A to the Stockholm Convention. And now moving on to the chemicals that were considered already at previous meetings. So there are 4 pesticides, insecticides, fentoate, profenophos, proteophos, and quinalphos. For each of them, there was a notification from Malaysia considered at CRC 20, but the committee did not manage to reach agreement on whether these notifications met the criteria of Annex 2. And it sought additional information from Malaysia on these notifications. And Malaysia has responded to this request for information, and the additional information submitted by them is available in the information documents setting out the supporting documentation submitted by Malaysia. And also to add that for all those 4, The second notification that was available from another PIC region was reviewed by CRC 20 and found to not meet the criteria under the convention. So in all 4 cases, even if the notifications from Malaysia were found to meet the criteria, that would not trigger a listing recommendation because there's still a need for a second notification from another PIC region meeting the criteria. And then finally, we have a set of 5 chemicals: carbaryl, chlorphenvinphos, ethionine, metidation, and thiodicarb. These were also considered previously by the committee and going back until 17th meeting already for some of them. They all relate to notifications from Mozambique, where the committee previously could not reach agreement on whether they met the criteria. So the discussion of them will continue at CRC 21. The committee sought some specific information for the notifications from chlorphenvinphos and metidation. Mozambique did respond to these requests, and the information is available in the INF documents. In the cases of carbaryl, chlorphenvinphos, and thiodicarb, there would be matching notifications leading to a listing recommendation if they were found to meet the criteria. And also in the case of carbaryl, there's actually an additional new notification from Serbia available that also needs to be reviewed by the committee. And on the severely hazardous pesticide formulations, there are 3 proposals that were considered by CRC 21, submitted by the Lao People's Democratic Republic for cypermethrin emulsifiable concentrate 10%, cypermethrin emulsifiable concentrate 35%, and emamectin benzoate water-soluble granules 5%. So the committee will return to these 3 specific proposals, but also because it struggled to take a decision on these at the previous meeting, it set up an intersessional task group to carry out some work on the review of SHPF proposals. So in general, not specific to the 3 proposals. And specifically, the task group was mandated to revise the human health and environmental incident forms. So those are forms that are used by parties to make SHPF proposals. So they try to look into how to clarify and update the forms with a view for parties to provide information to the committee that helps it take a decision on whether they meet the criteria under the convention. And as a second part, the committee also mandated the task group to update an existing collection of SHPF proposal examples. So that is a collection that's part of the CRC handbook. And this task group updated the collection of examples and also tried to clarify a bit how these proposals were evaluated in the past and whether they led to listing recommendations or not. The meeting document on this issue is already available, but the information document setting out the revised human health environmental incident forms and the collection of examples is going to be uploaded shortly because the intersessional work was going on until very recently, and now the outputs are available and will be made available shortly. And then some other matters. Under the agenda item on rotation of the membership, the committee will be looking into selecting an interim chair for its next meeting, because the term of office of the current chair, Ms. Kawai from South Africa, is ending at the end of April 2026. And the last COP mandated CRC to identify an interim chair for its next meeting, which will then be elected officially at the next COP. And also a couple of bureau members that are leaving the committee at the same time that need to be replaced. And under the agenda item of other matters, there will be 3 items taking up. The updated indicative list of substances covered by the listing of PFOA, its salts, and PFOA-related compounds. So these substances are listed in Annex 3 to the Convention, and at the time of listing, the COP requested the Secretariat to prepare in consultation with the committee an indicative list of these substances and to make it available on the Convention website and update it periodically. So the CRC is looking at this list at every meeting. And this work is done together with the work under the Stockholm Convention, even though the listing of the compounds there is not identical. Then the committee will look into effective participation in the work of the CRC and activities to facilitate such participation, and then also a first preliminary information about how the next intersessional period will be structured. And finally, this is the tentative schedule of the CRC meeting. You find it in information document number 2. So you can see on the first day, the committee would take up the organizational matters, the review of the outcomes of the last COP, and the rotation of the membership. And then it would start its technical work. In the morning, 3 of the chemicals, in the afternoon, another 3 chemicals. And then at night, contract and drafting groups would convene as needed. Wednesday would deal with the remaining new chemicals and then also start with the SHPF work. And then as of Wednesday afternoon, the committee would go back to these old notifications, first the ones from Malaysia, and then on Thursday, the ones from Mozambique. And this is all as time permits. The agenda is quite full. So if more time is needed to discuss the new notifications, it might be that some of the older ones get moved to the next meeting and considered there. So this is really an attempt to make best use of the time, but making sure that sufficient time is available for all the discussions. Thursday afternoon would be reserved for contact groups as needed, and then Friday to deal with the remaining agenda items. With that, I thank you very much for your attention. I will hand over to my colleague Kay for the POPRC part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea, and welcome all participants to this briefing on the CRC and POPRC meeting to take place in September. So 21st meeting of the POPs Review Committee will be held back-to-back with CRC the following week, starting on Monday afternoon. It's just like CRC, POPs Review Committee is a scientific subsidiary body that consists of 31 government-designated experts, and it is tasked with reviewing chemicals proposed for listing in Annexes A, B, and/or C, and also undertake other technical work as assigned to it by the COP. The process is provided in Article 8 with criteria and information requirements set out in Annexes D, E, and F. So the POPs Review Committee, the 21st meeting will start on 29 September and until 3rd of October in the same venue as CRC in Rome, FAO headquarters. There will be an online pre-meeting for all pre-registered participants on the 15th of September from 1 to 4 p.m. European time. I have just sent an MS Team link to those who have already pre-registered to the POPs Review Committee meeting. For those who will be registering from today onwards, will receive the link a bit later. As mentioned by Andrea, the registration is now extended until end of this week. The meeting will be chaired by Mr. Peter Dawson from New Zealand, and you can find all documents and information on the website that is indicated in here. The registration will start on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and then there will be in the morning orientation session for POPRC members, and there might be a side event, although it is not an official side event of the meeting because the opening of the plenary will be at 2:30 p.m. Since we have received quite a number of requests for side event, we might have additional side events already taking place Monday morning or Monday lunch break. So we will send this more detailed schedule to registered participants in due course. The plenary hours for the rest of the week will be morning 9:30 to 12:30 and afternoon 2:30 to 5:30. And there will be contact groups meeting in the evenings and where there's no plenary. The meeting will be in the 6 UN languages, except for contact groups, which will be in English only. The provisional agenda is available in document number 1. And as you can see, this time round, the main consideration of chemicals proposed for listing will be just only one, but there are a number of technical work that needs to be addressed, taking advantage of the fact that there is only one chemical for consideration. There will be an annotated agenda, document 1/add1, that will tell you which documents to look at for each agenda item. And a scenario note prepared by the chair of the committee is available on the website as INF1. The tentative schedule of the meeting is also available on the website in INF2. So please take note of the more detailed schedule for Monday morning, which will be communicated to all pre-registered participants by email in coming days. But even though there will be no plenary session, it would be great if you could come to the venue already during Monday morning. The session will open at 2:30 p.m. in the FAO headquarters. And during that morning session, we will look at the draft risk profile for brominated dioxins and chlorinated and brominated mixture dioxins and furans. And we are planning to organize a reception, and we're still inviting any host or donor to support the organization of this reception, as we do not have the funding included in our original budget. So if we can fundraise for reception, we will have that event planned in the evening of Monday. So let me know if you are willing to contribute. Then Tuesday morning, we will look at the rotation of the membership, including the incoming members that were identified at the last COP, and then review of the outcomes of COP12 that are relevant to the work of the POPRC. Then we will move on to other technical matters like evaluation of PFOS, and then PFOI for PFOB, which is related to PFOA, and review of MCCPs. The committee will also look at indicative lists of several different PFAS listed under the convention. Another item to consider is the follow-up to the report on POPs in products and articles, and to enhance the submission of information pursuant to Annex F. And under this item, there are 3 elements for consideration. I will explain in the coming slides. The final technical item relates to global monitoring plan for newly listed POPs. So when there are no plenary sessions, we will have contact groups to address more detailed matters. On Friday, we will most likely adopt decisions as needed, and then consider venue and dates for POPRC 21. And after that, we will discuss the work plan for intersessional period, which also depends on the dates of the POPRC. Sorry, I think it should be 22. I will correct this slide after this meeting. And then item 8 on other matters. The meeting is expected to close in the afternoon on Friday, 3rd of October. So the first technical item, the consideration of the draft risk profile for polybrominated dibenzopyridioxins and dibenzofurans, and mixed polybrominated and chlorinated dibenzopyridioxins and dibenzofurans will be discussed in the Monday afternoon. The draft risk profile is available in document number 2, with additional information in INF5 and compilation of comments in INF6. These chemicals were proposed by Switzerland for listing, and at the previous meeting, the committee was satisfied with the Annex D screening criteria. So at this meeting, the committee is expected to consider whether these chemicals are likely, as a result of their long-range environmental transport, to lead to significant adverse human health and/or environmental effects, such that global action is warranted. So this is a very important statement for the committee to consider based on the Annex E information provided by parties and observers. Note that these chemicals are unintentionally produced, which means that it is proposed for listing in Annex C only and not for A or B. So there will be no consideration about, for example, specific exemptions or alternatives and so on. This is an unintentional released chemical. But if the committee decides that these chemicals are POPs, then it will invite Annex F information and agree to develop draft risk management evaluation. So what are those dioxins and furans that contain bromines or chlorines? So as you know, chlorinated dioxins and furans are already listed in Annex C to the Stockholm Convention from the beginning as part of initial 12 POPs. Now, what's nominated are those dioxins and furans with bromines contained, or the mixtures of chlorinated dioxins and brominated dioxins. You can see in the POPRC 21 document 2 the scope of the evaluation, and that it does not include the already listed chemicals, dioxins and furans with chlorides, but they have very similar properties and structures with the chlorinated counterparts, but it includes bromine atoms and so on. So this is the document. Now the next technical item for consideration is the evaluation of the continued need for PFOS salts and PFOS-F. The document is in number 3, and there's a draft terms of reference for conducting the evaluation in INF7, which should be available during this week on the website. That will accompany the consideration of this agenda item. The committee is expected to agree on the terms of reference for conducting the evaluation and then invite parties and observers to provide relevant information. You might recall that this is not the first time that the committee is conducting this evaluation. It's actually the 4th time. The PFOS is listed in Annex B to the convention. It was listed in 2009 with several acceptable purposes and specific exemptions. The evaluation started in 2015, and it took place every 4 years, 2019, 2023, and the next evaluation by the COP is in 2027. So at the 2019 COP, taking into account the recommendation by the POPRC, the listing of PFOS in Annex B was further amended to reduce the number of acceptable purposes and specific exemptions. So currently there are only one acceptable purpose. This is for insect bites with sulframide as an active ingredient for control of leaf-cutting ants. And then 2 specific exemptions. One is for hard metal plating, and the second one is firefighting foam. You might also recall that for most of parties to the Stockholm Convention, these 2 specific exemptions are set to expire on 3rd of December this year. And earlier this year's COP, there was a request for extending the specific exemption for firefighting foam for the Republic of Korea for extra 4 years until 2030. So this was already discussed a little bit at the previous COP, but the committee will look at all of these exemptions available under a PFOS listing. The next technical item is the review of the specific exemption for the use of perfluorooctyl iodide for the production of perfluorooctyl bromide for the purpose of producing pharmaceutical products pursuant to paragraph 3 of part 10 of Annex A to the Convention. So these chemicals, PFOI is the actually PFOA related compounds, and therefore it is listed with the specific exemptions. And the evaluation will be the first one as per the provision in paragraph 3 of part 10 of Annex A. And this evaluation is expected to take place every 4 years. The committee is to agree on the terms of reference for conducting the review and invite parties and observers to provide relevant information. So pretty much similar to the previous agenda item. The draft terms of reference setting out INF 8 should also be available on website during this week. So here's a slide to provide some little information about PFOI and PFOB. This chemical PFOA, its salts and PFOA related compound was considered for listing in quite a few years ago, and in POPRC 13 document, POPRC 13.7/add2, this is the risk management evaluation for PFOA, its salts and PFOA related compounds. You can find information about this perfluorooctyl bromide, PFOB, and perfluorooctyl iodide. Here you can see that PFOB itself is not a PFOA related compound, but PFOI is a PFOA related compound, and for the production of PFOB, PFOI is necessary. And this chemical is used for producing or manufacturing porous particles that is essential for some of the pharmaceutical products, in particular to cure lung-related disease. You know, these little particles that require spread of the chemical in certain ratios that requires the treatment. So you can find further information in that risk management evaluation document, but also the industry producing this chemical has kindly provided further more up-to-date information for consideration at POPRC 21, just as a background information, and this will be available for meeting participants. Then the next item is the review of medium chain chlorinated paraffins pursuant to paragraph 2 and 12 of part 13 of Annex A. So these reviews by the COP are not taking place right now. It is expected with regard to the first review of MCCPs pursuant to para 2 that relates to 3% threshold will take place at COP 14 in 2029, and the other review of specific exemptions is expected at COP 15 in 2031. The reason why we have this agenda item at this meeting is because the current POPRC members were involved in the review of MCCPs from risk profile and risk management evaluation, and also followed the COP discussion, and that they are very familiar with those provisions and why the review was included. And so instead of waiting until close to 2029, when all of the members might be rotated, we will have this agenda item so that draft terms of reference for conducting these reviews can be prepared. The draft TORs prepared at POPRC 29 will be further considered at POPRC 23 in 2027 to fine-tune and also tailor to the newer information that might be available at that time. And then the review will be initiated afterwards. It is also possible to start collecting information from parties and observers, but this is optional. And so the draft decision has square brackets around the collection of information. So if you think that it is too early to do anything, you don't have to collect information, but we can also start such awareness raising among parties and observers on MCCP's threshold, as well as specific exemptions from after POPRC 21 meeting. So here in my next slide, we just remind what were those reviews agreed in decision adopted at the previous COP listing MCCPs. So paragraph 2 of part 13 of Annex A states that Note 1 of Annex A does not apply when the summed concentration of the following chloroalkanes in substances or mixtures occur at the concentration greater than 3% by weight. So this is basically providing the threshold for unintentional trace contaminants. And it states that this provision is subject to review by the Conference of the Parties at its 14th ordinary meeting and at every second ordinary meeting thereafter, with a view to reducing the limit over time. Note 1 of Annex A provides that, except as otherwise specified in this convention, quantities of chemical occurring as unintentional trace contaminants in products and articles shall not be considered to be listed in this annex, which means that unintentional trace contaminants, without specifying any specific threshold, are not under control as per Annex A or Annex B. The same text is also available under Annex B. And then the other review, pursuant to paragraph 12 of part 13 of Annex A, this one relates to specific exemptions. There are a number of specific exemptions for MCCPs agreed, and some of them have longer time period. Those specific exemptions that were reviewed in detail by POPRC with the particular time frame already proposed or recommended by the committee before the COP, it doesn't have a review process. But for paragraph 8 of 9, the specific exemptions specified in these paragraphs, the information was not available for POPRC to review, and therefore paragraph 12 provides this review process. So these applications relate to ammunition pyrotechnic defense devices to achieve specific effects. This is available until 2041. Another one is intumescent coating and paint for space and defense equipment, and it's packaging to protect against extreme temperature. And this is also until 2041. So for these applications, the COP decided to conduct a review at starting at COP 15 and at every second ordinary meeting thereafter to review the continued need for these exemptions. Right. So in the terms of reference, in INF 8, there will be 2 annexes, one providing the terms of reference to conduct the review related to threshold, and then another one that relates to the review related to the specific exemptions, because the timing is different. Now, there is another item, indicative list of substances covered by the listings of long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acids, and then PFOA and PFHXS. So there are here 3 sets of chemicals that are included in the agenda item. And you can see, you recall that there was an intersessional working group that was that developed indicative list of substances covered by the listing of long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acids, their salts and related compounds, with some explanatory note that addresses the issue of overlap with PFOA-related compounds. Now we have 2 Excel files available. I think those will be posted during today on the website. So please check on our website a little bit later. One listing track change version, and then another one a clean version. So you can see in the track change version comments and how the intersessional working group have addressed these comments, and there are some elements that require further consideration at POPRC 21. For example, the intersessional working group received comments indicating that many of, or some of those related long-chain PFCS related compounds are also PFOA related compounds. And if it is really only one listing to control the chemical, then we will need to really harmonize these 2 lists. The response from the chair and drafter of the group was that for the moment, they did not remove all of these or mark all of these potential chemicals that are overlapping with PFOA-related compounds, and they have indicated this as something that needs to be discussed at POPRC 21. So obviously the same issue occurs in the indicative list of substances covered by the listing of PFOA, salts and PFOA-related compounds. So this one you will see also the Excel file on our website at the reference section soon. And then there will be a list of PFH excess. This is less complicated, but we have received some comments during the intersessional period, so there will be an updated version. And because there is an exception of chemicals that are covered by the listing of PFOS, its salts and PFOS-F, those are not included in the listing of PFOA-related compounds. We have also prepared a draft list of PFOS as well for consideration. But note that this list is very, I don't know how come this noise. I hope that, yeah, okay. I think this is not from my side. So PFOS list is a very initial list, only listing precursors, and it could be strengthened further by the committee's with the committee's expertise. Two more technical items. The first one is a follow-up to the report on POPs in products and articles, enhancing the submission of information, first one to Annex F. And this one is you recall, let me just go to the next one. So you recall that during the intersessional period, there was a report prepared by the committee on POPs in stockpiles, products, articles, and waste. You can download the publication from this QR code. And COP12 welcomed this report and then decided to continue efforts to improve the identification of POPs in stockpiles, products, articles in use and in waste, and also requested the Secretariat to assist the committee in gathering information on POPs in products, and then to give guidance to parties on labeling, etc. So following up on that work, there will be mainly 3 items for consideration at POPRC 21. The first one is on information on uses and alternatives to chemicals proposed for listing. As you might recall, during the COP, there has been a lot of discussion on use and the availability of alternatives. Information that was not available to the committee during the Annex F stage. And the need for more comprehensive Annex F submissions from all parties and observers across regions was highlighted, and therefore this is the chair of the committee suggesting that the POPRC consider this theme and in a view to improving the Annex F information collection. The chair also noted the challenges with new listings that involves widely used chemicals such as UV328, chlorpyrifos, and medium chain chlorinated paraffins. This highlights the gaps in information on exemptions, continuing uses, and also environmentally sound disposal. Chair also noted the need to improve engagement with industry and governments and provide further guidance so that they can submit information on Annex F in more comprehensive manner. Then the second point to consider is possible control measures and status of control and monitoring capacity. So understanding the regulatory, technical, and voluntary measures, along with national, regional monitoring capacity, is key for accessing feasibility and effectiveness of risk reduction options. This is particularly relevant to industrial chemicals with a complex nature, including in monitoring or detecting the chemical in products. And then another question arose related to Note 2 of Annex A and B, related to articles in use and their trade, because this provision can be considered in a different manner by different parties, and therefore a chair suggested to collect additional information through, for example, through surveys on how parties are applying Note 2 and to help enhance further understanding of this provision. The final point under this item relates to waste and disposal implications. This topic came up quite a few times in the previous POPRC meetings as well, and it has been highlighted the importance of involving waste-related experts in the consideration by the POPs Review Committee. But now within Annex F information form, there is a request for waste and disposal implications, and this information could also help in setting low POP content values, and therefore this is the third topic for consideration under this agenda item. So for your information, I think you are all familiar with the Annex F information form that is currently used by the committee. And this was first developed at POPRC 2 and then revised at POPRC 5. And there has been continued sort of program or work that relates to enhancing the effectiveness of the participation by parties and observers in the process of POPs Review Committee. And there was actually intersessional working group in the past developed the POPRC handbook. So this work relates to that effort. Now it's 11 o'clock, but I try to wrap up. The final technical item is a global monitoring plan for newly listed POPs. So the GMP supports effectiveness evaluation under Article 16 of the Stockholm Convention, and I can talk about it another 1 hour or so about how global monitoring plan works and how it is helping the evaluation of the Stockholm Convention. But here, what is relevant to the POPRC is that the GMP will need to include newly listed POPs in their framework for monitoring, but they have been experiencing more and more challenges as many of the newly listed POPs are more complicated and challenging to analyze, for example, MCCPs or long-chain PFCAs. And there have so many related compounds, and that is really putting a lot of pressure on parties in conducting monitoring exercise, especially when they are currently focusing only on background data and not necessarily targeting more exposure-related or hotspot identification. So based on the recommendation by the Effectiveness Evaluation Committee and also the discussion by Global Coordination Group for GMP, it was considered important to involve and engage with the POPs Review Committee experts in considering the approaches for conducting GMP in a more effective manner, especially for newly listed POPs. So this is the agenda item on GMP, and also E15 should be available during this week on our website. So thank you very much for your attention. My presentation that's it, and I'm happy to also open the floor also for CRC for any questions if we have a few minutes before we close. Questions at the moment, you can raise your hand. I guess, Andrea, you can also see the floor from your side.
Yes, and I see that there is one question by Martin whether the presentations will be made available. And yes, they'll be sent out by email as usually after the meeting.
Specific questions by email to us. I think Parvoleta raised a hand, perhaps for CRC. Andrea, do you want to take Parvoleta?
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Go
can
ahead.
hear you.
Just a quick question. Did you align the list, the tentative list of P4A related compounds for the purposes of the CRC discussion, and with the one which is for the POPRC and for the POPs implementation, I would say?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Indeed, the list will be identical, and there are two columns, one indicating that this chemical relates to Stockholm Convention, and then another column marks, where if the chemical relates to the Rotterdam Convention. The definition of PFOA related compounds was slightly different. It's almost the same, but slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore we needed to have these two columns indicated in that same Excel file so that parties can see what are the overlaps and what are different. So these two lists to be submitted to CRC and POPRC is going to be identical.
Thank you very much. That clarification is very important because we are, especially in Bulgaria, we are in the process of updating the national implementation plan. And this is also in the scope with alignment of the lists and also inventory, which is addressing also the which substances are in the scope of the PEEK and POPs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much. And then at the POPRC, there will be further discussion on how to deal with the overlap with the long chain PFCA related compounds and PFOA related compounds. The current understanding is that, PFOA related compounds that are also, the other way, long chain PFCAs related compounds that are also PFOA related compounds will be considered as listed under PFOA listing. So, however, it looks like there are so many chemicals that are overlap, and therefore further discussion is needed at POPRC 21 to clarify these the point related to the overlap of these two related compounds.
Thank you very much. That is really very, very useful.
Okay, so since the time is already over and I don't see any further hand up, perhaps we can close this session and we can share the presentation files with participants, and we welcome any additional questions if you have any by emails or something. Is that okay with you, Andrea?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody.
Right, thank you, bye-bye.